Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've had a fantastic start to the new year so far and all your language learning plans are in place and up and running. I really appreciate you guys tuning into the show every week. Without you, the show wouldn't exist, so I appreciate you. I'm looking forward to another fantastic year of answering your questions. Now, I've got a fantastic question today from Alexia, who wrote in by email. And this is Alexia's question. I've been learning Polish intermittently for a few years and can hold a basic conversation. However, I started learning Polish with the intention of being able to communicate with patients at work. I can still not take a medical history and wondered whether you have any tips for how to go about learning this. Cool. Okay, Alexia, thank you very much for your question. It's a great question. Now, I was in a restaurant recently in Soho in the centre of London. It was a Vietnamese restaurant. And I remember the waiter came in and he was a Vietnamese guy and he could barely speak any English. He said some stuff. It was very difficult to understand what he said. He was very, very, you get these people who move abroad and they very quickly become, start to adapt to the local culture. And then you get people who don't. And this is one of these guys, in his way of being, his way of acting. He was very, very Vietnamese still. It was almost like he was still in Vietnam. And I noticed that his English was very, very poor. Difficult to understand what he was saying. He was kind of rude. Didn't really seem to care about us as the customer. So I just remember thinking at that point, wow, this is going to be and how does he do this job, How does he get by? But what was really, really interesting was as soon as we started to order the food, and I was with some people who were making some kind of funny requests as well. Can we have this dish a bit like that or like that? What does this have in it? It was kind of tough for him. But he got through it absolutely fine. He knew exactly what we were talking about. He could answer all of our questions. And it struck me, this guy can do what he has to do in the job that he does perfectly, despite the fact that by all other accounts, his English is dreadful. And so, Alexia, when you asked me this question, this is the thing that came to mind for me. Now, you've done a fantastic job actually being able to get to a conversational level in Polish. So, well done, congratulations. That's the main, you've broken the back of the language, and that's cool. But I think there's a question here of expectations. Because if you have been studying conversational Polish for the last few years, then, what makes you think that it's normal for you to suddenly be able to take a medical history in the language? I would say that for pretty much anyone out there who has learned another language, even to a high level, even if you're a C1 in a language, I'm not sure that you would accurately be able to take a medical history of somebody because it's very, very specific vocabulary that you need. If you think of a few medical conditions off the top of your head, how many of you guys listening actually know how to talk about serious medical conditions in another language? We don't, right? It's not something that we know how to do. And the reason is because it's just not in our everyday vocabulary. Right? It's not something you'd study ever, really, unless either it happened to you or you were studying the field maybe in university or something like that. Right? So the waiter could talk about some fairly complex food-related stuff because he was familiar with the context and he's familiar with the vocabulary and the types of questions that we would ask. All right? So quite simply, Alexa, all you have to do is to take this great foundation that you've got and then actually intentionally target the types of things that you will need to do in order to fulfill your duties in your job. Okay? And I would start by actively thinking about exactly what it is that you have to do, right? So imagine, I'm assuming that you would normally do this in English. So I would start to make notes of all the things that you find yourself saying and doing on a daily basis at work in English. Okay, these might be questions that you ask your patients. It might be simple greetings. It might be things that they say to you. And what you'll find is that after a while, the same things will start to crop up over and over again. Okay, you're unlikely to find yourself having unlimited amounts of new things being said. All right, so start by kind of cataloging all the most common things that you're going to say or hear on a daily basis in English. And then what you need to do is figure out how to say that stuff in Polish, because it's going to be the same stuff. I don't think English people and Polish people have particularly different medical histories. But then I know I may be wrong. But I would have thought that the most common things would be the same in between both languages. What I would do then is I would take it to a tutor, and maybe you have a Polish tutor already. You might need to find someone with a bit more of a specialism. Okay, so you might, for example, go to italki, and you might look for Polish speakers and see if anyone's got familiarity with medical stuff, and then work with a tutor and basically say to them exactly what you are looking for. So say, like, I work in a hospital, I need to learn to say a bunch of stuff in Polish. I've got the stuff here already, I know what I need to say, can you help me say it? And then take lessons with them, and first of all start by just translating the stuff. So if someone says, I have a history of high blood pressure, then get your Polish tutor to teach you exactly how to say that in Polish. All right, so start to basically translate across your catalogue of things in English into Polish. All right, now this sounds kind of rote and rather dull, and it may well prove to be that, but here's the thing, you already know the language, you can already speak Polish. We don't need to get any technical here, we don't need to make it any more complex than it actually is. Yours is a question of vocabulary. So once you've gone through and you've translated that stuff and you've learned it, you might like to use something like a lot of medical students I know use flashcards to test themselves on vocabulary. I like flashcards myself. There are people who don't. That's cool. There are other ways. But that would be plenty of ways to go about memorizing vocabulary. And then once you've started to build up some of this vocabulary that you need in Polish, then with that same tutor, start to role play. All right. So tell them, again, explain the kind of situations that you're in, and then get your tutor to play the part of a patient and just role play over and over again. And then in that case, you'll start to put into action the vocabulary that you're using. And then that is very, very similar then to an actual case that you might have at work. Think about it. If you are there role-playing medical histories with your tutor in Polish, how different is that really going to be from what you're going to encounter at work? It's going to be a very, very fast, efficient, effective way of doing that. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. It's not much more complicated than that, I don't think. You will straight away find that applying, you'll find it practical and applicable to work. There will still be things, obviously, that patients say that you don't understand. If that's the case, make a note of it, take it back to your tutor, get them to explain it. It's really a process of systematically going through the vocabulary that you need until you need it. All right. One other thing you could do, depending on if this takes your fancy or not, is to actually read books on that subject matter in Polish. If you can get, a book of some kind which features a lot of medical histories. Often in this case, the difficulty is actually finding appropriate material. How can you find something to read that has in it the kind of vocabulary that you need? I'm not sure. That's something I'd have to look into. But anyway, this is something that you'll be able to do really quickly with a bit of focus and a bit of energy. Really in no time you're going to start to be able to take these case histories in Polish, and I have no doubt that you'll do really, really well. So I hope that's helpful for you, Alexia. And if you would like to ask me a question, maybe you're having some kind of struggle at the moment with your language learning, maybe you run up against a brick wall, or you're just looking for a way to learn faster, to achieve your goals quicker, why not send me a question? I'd be very happy to answer it on the podcast. All you have to do is go over to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask. Also, if you've been listening to the show for some time and you've been enjoying it, there is one thing you could do that would mean the world to me, which is to leave a honest review of the show on iTunes. This helps me, this does a number of things. Not only does it help me reach other people out there who may be struggling with language learning and help them to discover the show, but it's also extremely motivating for me to see people out there who are enjoying and appreciating the show. So if you'd like to do that, if you'd like to help me out and leave a review for the show, you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/review. Now, at the end of every episode, I'd like to leave you with a resource of some kind on the topic of the show. And I think related to today, there was an episode back in, let me see, which one was it? Episode 59. And it was from a great guy called Derek who was living in Sweden. And he wanted to know how he could understand his colleagues at work. And it's a very, very similar case to what Alexia's talked about today. It's about identifying exactly what you need and starting to systematically work through it. Okay, so I recommend that you go back and listen to that, which will be at iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 59. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode, and in case you didn't already know, I teach languages in a rather unusual way through stories. Now, stories are a great way to learn a new language because when you're engrossed in a story, you remember things more easily, and the mechanics of the language just start clicking inside your brain. It's quite something, and if you'd like to find out how you can learn a new language or improve your skills in a language that you already know and do it with the power of stories, then you should check out my free Story Learning Kit, which will teach you exactly how this method works and how you can use it yourself to learn a new language. Visit storylearning.com/podkit, that's PODKIT, to get free access. Inside, you'll find explanatory videos, masterclasses, worksheets, short stories to practice with, and much, much more. Once again, that is storylearning.com/podkit, PODKIT, and if you're lucky, you might also find a link in the podcast description or show notes of this episode.